So, I love Warhammer. If you've watched this channel for a while or listened to the podcast, you know that I'm a huge 40k guy. I have 3 full armies, a smattering of kill teams, played a handful of the video games, and listened to quite a few books. Growing up, I got the original Space Marine game for the Xbox 360 way back when. Jesus Christ, I'm old. I loved it. Titus was such a cool character, and playing him really felt like the Space Marine power fantasy that we all wanted it to be. Don't get me wrong, it's a very 2010s game, it's far from perfect. The gameplay is a generic third-person cover shooter and can be clunky at most times. You can tell it came out around the time it did because the epic final battle between Titus and Nemeroth is an overly long and way too easy quick-time event. Now, even though it's not perfect, it had a pretty accessible story, some badass moments, and some serviceable story beats. This made it a pretty popular choice amongst 40k fans who are looking to game a bit because it's one of the first non-strategy 40k games that is actually pretty fun. Also, it inspired an entire subreddit because this game introduced one of the most hated Warhammer characters ever, Leandros. Leandros is a stick-in-the-mud bitch. He's the worst. I'm a proud member of the Fuck Leandros subreddit. More on him later, though. After 2011, the days of Space Marine were gone. So imagine my surprise and imagine how erect I was when this unnamed badass in the trailer took off his helmet and was revealed to be Titus. You could say I was pretty excited. Space Marine 2 has experienced a pretty significant delay, but a lot of people were taking a let-them-cook approach to focus delaying the game for almost a year. So, was it worth it? Is Space Marine 2 the 40k game we all wanted? Well, maybe. Before we get into spoilers, I'll give a truncated version of this review to those who have yet to play. The gameplay is a really solid hack-and-slash and third-person shooter hybrid. If you like this type of game, you're probably in luck. You can kill swaths of Tyranids and Heretics, and this really does a good job of being a Space Marine simulator where you can live at that power fantasy just like in the first game. If you like Space Marines, you'll find a lot of pretty familiar stuff here. There's plenty of bolt rounds and chain swords in this game while you mow down the enemies of the Imperium of Man. If you're new to Warhammer, I do think that you can still get plenty of fun out of this, especially if you just want a fun way to kill a shitload of enemies with your friends. While the story is far from perfect, there's a solid gameplay loop in here and lots of great customization. Overall, probably a 7 out of 10. With potential for new content to make the game a bit better in regards to customization, new stories, and more multiplayer content. Time to get into the meat and potatoes of the game, and the main reason why there was so much hype behind it. The campaign. To start, this prologue/tutorial mission is genuinely great. I love it. You play as an unknown Deathwatch Marine that crash lands onto a planet infested by Tyranids. While you learn to punch, kick, shoot, slash, and praise the Emperor, your squadmates get picked off one by one while you survive. Eventually making a final stand setting off a virus bomb, it's revealed to us that we're playing as Titus in the Death Watch. He makes an epic last stand against the Carnifex and dies. That is, until he crosses the Rubicon Primaris. Because this super dangerous surgery with a slim chance of survival doesn't matter and it's just a power boost for the good guys. I kid, even though my feelings on characters crossing the Rubicon may go against the grain here, this game is one of the most lore-accurate and true-to-form 40k games that I've ever played. So, Titus becomes a Primaris Lieutenant because we don't have enough of those, and is given various missions throughout Avarax and Kudaku to take down the Xenos Scourge. This is around an 8-hour campaign, and it features some pretty cool missions, but lacks in the character development. And also, the story overall feels pretty sloppy. But wait, don't get pissy with me yet. Let me elaborate. Spoilers for the Space Marine 2 campaign, inbound. Like I already mentioned, the first tutorial mission is really great, and does a great job of setting up how grand the threat of the Tyranids are. Your first few missions have some interesting setups like the Lictor boss fight, the tomfoolery of the Mechanicus, and the introduction of the Chaos threat. I'm not going to break down every single level, but I have a few key complaints about the story that we're going to get into here in a minute. But before I become a whiny baby, let me talk about what I actually really enjoyed first. Like I said, the Deathwatch level is great. I have no notes about that, it's awesome. Throughout the campaign, the Tyranids are a super interesting threat, and it feels great to take hundreds of them down at a time. The warriors all having different weapon loadouts really makes you feel like you're constantly fighting this unending and adaptive swarm. Even though there's not a lot of them, the boss fights with the Nids all feel really different and always add something new to the gameplay. On the note of the Nids diversity, I wish the person who came up with the 2 zoanthrope arenas to have a permanent case of step on a Lego brick every single day barefooted because they're terrible. We're greeted to some gorgeous battlefields and interesting weapons and mechanics throughout the entirety of the campaign. The graphics are gorgeous. There's plenty of brothers that get thrown around, and you're greeted to a gory mess every single time you load into the game. Now, the crux of the story circles around the Aurora Project and Titus getting used to being an Ultramarine again, and some of the reservations that people have around. The Aurora Project is a secret Mechanicus project that is tied to the MacGuffin from the first game. It's an extremely powerful artifact that the Mechanicus think they can be using as a super weapon. Titus, having experience with this relic from the first game, causes some strife as he tries to warn his superiors about what the relic could do if the ne'er-do-wells of the 41st millennium get their hands on it. Now, of course, Captain Archeron doesn't believe this and is staying by the book and is supporting the Mechanicus in their endeavor to create a potential super weapon. Here comes my first legit complaint. I think this story would have been better if it was completely removed from the first game's narrative. Space Marine 1 had some cool characters, but the story was very surface level, and this relic was basically just a MacGuffin to lead us towards the conflict with the Chaos Marines and Nemesis. What was different this time? Pretty much nothing. It serves as a MacGuffin that leads us to conflict with the Chaos Marines, and this time Imara, and instead of Nemeroth. The first time Titus interacts with this artifact in Space Marine 2, he seems weirdly sensitive to it, even though the whole reason he was reported to the Inquisition at the end of the first game was because he was immune to its effects. So, I'm not sure if that's inconsistent writing, or if maybe I don't understand the inner machinations of the warp. Either way, if it was just a different warp artifact, or cough cough, could have just been straight up Blackstone, it could have led to a different and potentially better story. Arguably, my hottest take is that Chaos really shouldn't have even been in this story. Even though I love the Forces of Chaos in the lore, the Thousand Suns enemies don't really add any interesting gameplay or story elements in my opinion. For the gameplay aspect, the Thousand Suns don't talk at all, and yes, I know they don't really talk in lore, but walk with me here. So their presence doesn't feel as imposing as the screeching Gonson warriors. Also, all of the Rubric Marines kind of play the same. While the Tyranid warriors have these varied loadouts and can easily switch between ranged and melee combat, the Rubrics just kind of don't. There's the Flamer guys and the Bolter guys and the occasional Sorcerer, and it just feels kind of plain. Still on the Chaos side of things, I think the Zangors don't add too much either, but they're not bad. They're just kind of chaff enemies. They basically serve as the chaff and distract you while you try to focus on the Rubrics. In the future, I'd love to see stuff like Flying Horrors, maybe a Vortex Beast, and other Chaos goodness when they add new enemies. On the story end of things, I feel like Chaos doesn't add too much either. Amura is neat and he seems super petty, but he just didn't really hit like Nemeroth did. He says that he's been watching Titus for a while, but unless I missed something, they never really follow up on what was so special about him. Like, was he watching Titus when he died fighting the Carnifex? Or was he watching since Titus had the reaction to Project Aurora? Only Zinch knows, I guess. I think it would have been a lot more interesting and would have built Amura up as more of a threat if it turns out that he'd been watching since Titus was on Graia. I would have really liked it if they played into just how layered and detailed Zinch's plans can be. So if it turns out he's been watching Titus for hundreds of years, waiting for this moment, I think that could have been a lot better. Imagine if Amura pulled all the strings, made sure Titus was in the Death Watch, made sure Titus was deployed to Avarax and Gadaku. Also, Titus can give Amura access to the MacGuffin at the end of the game. But I think if we circumvented the Chaos angle altogether, we could have had a more captivating end to the campaign, personally. On to the last of my complaints of the campaign. I think the last hour or so of this campaign is just the Soyjack pointing meme. Oh, look, it's Marnius Kelgar. Oh, look, it's a tomb world. And it just kind of feels hollow. Don't get me wrong, in a vacuum, like, it looks gorgeous, you know, like, it looks great. But I think I would have preferred it if this was a more contained story. I feel like finding a tomb world would have made me really excited in another life, but the story already felt so busy between the Tyranid plot as well as Amura's plot happening right alongside it. You have Space Marines, Mechanicum, Tyranids, Chaos, and now Necrons are all playing a big part of the story. It just felt really crowded, and like I said already, it's very kind of like member berries. You know, it's just kind of like, oh, it's this thing from Warhammer, and it's like, yes, I know, we're playing a Warhammer game, I get it. Also, having Calgar, the big boy of the Ultramarines, march into the Immaterium with the squad, which they shouldn't be able to do in the slightest, just feels kind of fanficky, I guess. The boss fight, as well, was really only okay. It didn't do much for me. It feels better than the 5-minute quicktime event like in the first game, but fighting Amura didn't feel all that interesting. It feels just very kind of bullet spongy. You know, you dodge, chainsword, and that's kind of it. That being said, fighting the Lord of Change part of this fight was badass, and I did enjoy that part at the very least. As we defeat Amura and work our way through the Zinch trickery, we approach the end of the game. Then, of course, Titus reaches for the artifact, and through the power of being a named Ultramarine, he handles the MacGuffin with his bare hands, breaking it in half, saving the day. Naturally, he receives commendation from Calgar and the rest of his chapter, except for one. We receive a foreboding message from our chaplain, and I'm just going to play the clip of me watching this cutscene for the first time.
Oh, fuck off! Oh my god. Oh, Leandros is a trick-ass bitch, dude. Oh my fucking god, dude. He proved you wrong 2 goddamn times. 2 successful campaigns over 2 fucking centuries. That's not good enough. I fucking hate Leandros. Oh my god. Fuck.
So yeah, fuck Leandros. He sucks a fat one. I can't wait to watch him get murked in the DLC or something. As a side note, I find it really impressive that the writers of these games created an arguably top 5 most hated Warhammer character. Do you know how insane that is? You have people comparing them as if Lorgar is more of a bitch than Leandros. That is impressive. If you're not a lore nerd, I assure you, it's quite the feat. So, moving on from my moaning, let's start to close out my campaign. My pitch for what they could have done instead is as follows. So, I've already called the ending of the campaign fanficky, so I'm going to try and avoid going full AO3 and just go over a couple changes that I feel like could have made the story better. I think they should, first up, drop the chaos from the campaign like I said earlier. I know that they're fan favorites, but I think that if we exclusively did Tyranids for like the first 80% of the game, that would have been awesome. If we expanded on the Nids, I can imagine us taking down a Norn, or maybe taking part in a large military battle where our squad needs to take down Biovar artillery or something like that. They could have gotten really creative and had some very interesting encounters. I think if they could allow the Tyranids to be more fleshed out. I know these all sound like a lot, but I really didn't like how the big bad Hive Tyrant gets killed in a side mission while Titus and the gang deal with the T-Sun jobbers. So giving the main squad bigger boss missions I think could have made them feel a bit more impactful in the moment. My only other real suggestion here would be to, instead of Chaos being the secondary villains, just make Necrons the villains in the last act. Instead of having Luz be manipulated by Amura, have him be manipulated by a Cryptek that needs this MacGuffin to awaken the Tomb World for some reason. That way you can keep the Mechanicus can't be trusted angle, while introducing a new and even bigger threat. Imagine, Luz activates the artifact only for thousands of Scarab Storms to start waking up and rushing to your location. The final fight could have been an Overlord and his Cryptek advisor teleporting you around and vaporizing your support with Gauss weaponry. Now, I'm a bit of a Necron fanboy, so I'm biased here. They're one of my 3 armies I mentioned at the beginning of the video. But I think a straight pivot from Tyranids to Necrons could have been a bit cleaner and would have avoided a somewhat lackadaisical ending. Alright, that's about it for my criticism of the story. Let me talk about some other stuff that I liked. The Tyranids, pretty much all great. I really like the waves of Nids that came after you, and the mini-bosses like Raveners and Lictors spiced up the combat enough so you'd get a lot of different things happening in every different encounter. The character development isn't great, but the little moments really do kind of shine through here. Gadriel being a hot-headed and devout Codex follower makes him a more positive mirror to Leandros by the end of the game. Chiron's background with Chaos could have been flushed out more, but I did like seeing him go off on his Berserker Rage. He added a cool gameplay sequence with a really interesting story beat to coincide with it. Now, even though I want to beat him with a brick, Leandros coming in at the end and basically becoming Chief Narc, I play Black Templars, I can make that joke, you can't, of his company makes sense for his character. One aspect that I haven't actually talked about yet are the Cadians. I think the way they passively interact with you is just perfect. Whether they kneel when you walk past, or if you're just walking past and you see deserters being executed. The writers did justice to our boys and girls on the front lines. Finally, I think the banner scene is incredible. Is the gameplay kind of boring for that section? Yes. But is it one of the most badass moments of the campaign? Also yes. But what was the coolest moment in the campaign? Let me know in the comments, because I think this could be up for debate. But for me, it was when Dreadnought Dave chucked a statue at a Helldrake and taking it down. That guy was rad as hell. We love Dreadnought Dave. Alright, next up we have the dedicated PvE mode, Operations. These function as side missions that run parallel to the main campaign. If you ask me, this and the Eternal War mode are the reason people are going to keep coming back to play this game. Myself included. In Operations, you can play as your own custom Marine, which is most of the fun for most of the people I've spoken. You give 20-something-year-old dudes the ability to play dress up with power armor, and they'll just run with it. The customization here for the Imperium is flat out awesome. There's no microtransactions, and you just need to grind Eternal War and Operation matches to get the coolest gear that you want. It really feels like a breath of fresh air, not needing to have a battle pass that you could just bypass by spending your real hard-earned money. It takes me back to the ye old days of trying to prestige in the Modern Warfare games. And again, this is all just for cool looks. That's kind of it. One more note about the great customization in this game. Do you know how cool it feels to basically create your own Space Marine? Like, I've kit bashed and painted like 100 Space Marines since I started playing Warhammer back in 2020. It feels so cool to see one of my veterans right on the screen, and I'm able to play as them. It's awesome. Anyway, onto the actual Operations game mode, but I just needed to work in the customization somewhere. So, Operation missions, they don't feature any really cool cutscenes with a ton of character development, but they do have some of the coolest set pieces in the game in my opinion. Out of the 6 operations missions, I really like Inferno, Decapitation, and Reliquary. Inferno feels like this straightforward, grab this, do this, defend this mission, but it does it so well. There's no crazy boss fights, but you do need to hold a tough position while trying to blow up the incoming swarm with Promethium. Personally, I think this is one of the most fun hold-the-line objectives throughout any of the missions in the game. Especially because since this is your first operation, it can give you and your squad a taste of what's to come while you get forced to really use your class abilities up until the end. Next up is Decapitation. Hive Tyrant, my beloved. I think this is my favorite boss fight of the game. Not only is it cool walking through a ruined city and blowing up a bridge with the Hive Tyrant on it, but the Tyrant boss fight proves to be really challenging on higher difficulties. Not to mention, who doesn't want to fight one of the biggest and baddest Tyranid units in the game? No notes. It's just really frickin' good. For the last operation I want to talk about, we have Reliquary. Even though I'm not too crazy about fighting the Thousand Suns, dodging from building to building while also dodging Hellfire is a really engaging way to work your way through this war zone. At the end, you essentially have a raid boss fight with the Hell Drake. I really like how the Drake isn't just a bullet sponge. You need to make sure to activate the right consoles to take him down using strategy. I love it! My only hope with the new PvE missions and new enemies is that Saber isn't afraid to really experiment and show us new ways to take down our enemies. Give me a strategic way to take down a Vortex Beast. Or maybe we need to plant explosives around a Mauler feed. It'd be awesome to see. In the roadmap, they say new enemy during some of the seasons, and I'm not too sure what that means. Does that mean we'll just get a singular new unit? Like, maybe we're gonna get a Wing Prime and some Gargoyles. That'd be pretty cool. I would love that. However unlikely, I'd really like to see some Necron enemies tossed in there as well. Honestly, any new faction would be incredible, even though I don't think it's gonna happen. But I'm holding out hope. It'd be cool. Yeah, because, like, imagine having a tide of warriors backed up by immortals and destroyers. Maybe Cryptex could act as the sorcerers. It'd be so cool. Currently, it feels like you're creating your own lore with your buddies whenever you play operations, and I can't wait to see what's next. Alright, even though most people are playing PvP, it seems to be kind of contentious. In the script, I called this section of the video PvP Fun But Frustrating. I've probably played around 50 matches or so of PvP at the point of writing, so I think I've gotten the gist of what this game mode has to offer. We have 3 game modes, which isn't bad for a PvP that was sort of tacked on to the initial game, and 3 maps. I'm not gonna lie, only having 3 maps, it feels kind of stinky. I wish we had like 5 or 6. It would make the game feel far less repetitive. Another downside to this feeling tacked on is that there's basically 0 chaos customization. You can customize the colors, to be fair, but that's kind of it. Like I said earlier, it's still cool to play some of my custom Chaos Marines I have on the tabletop as well. That being said, I think they'll add the customization down the line for our trader brethren. There's literally space in the customization screen for them. I don't think they'd add the custom armor slots, and they didn't intend on adding those eventually. I don't need a full progression tree or anything, but just give me a couple different helmets and filigree I can add to my heritage. Okay, on to the actual gameplay. Good news, it's pretty damn fun. It's the same controls as the campaign with pretty much all the same working. The 6 distinct classes all have their own defined strengths and weaknesses. We have Tactical, which is your basic bread and butter Marine that thrives off of location information using his Auspex scan. Not great at any one particular thing, but they are good at a bit of everything. Range combat, melee combat, and speed. All pretty good. It's also kind of my main, to be honest with you. Next we have the Assault class, arguably the worst in the game unfortunately, but honestly, still not terrible. If you just wanted a power fantasy of running around with a jump pack and a thunderhammer, this is for you. If you can learn how to time your ground pounds, you can definitely be a threat to the enemy team. Considering that there's really no audio cue for when you're about to get jumped on, this is a good and sometimes kind of gimmicky class that can provide you with a bit of fun. Vanguard is your Phobos Marine stand-in that is excellent at jumping into combat using a grappling hook and blowing away enemies with close-range weaponry. Be warned though, Reavers are not this cool on the tabletop. Learn from my mistakes. They are fucking terrible on the tabletop. If you want to play Phobos in 40k tabletop, buy Infiltrators. They're pretty good. Reavers are terrible. Just save yourself. I know they look cool, but just please, learn from me. Don't do it. Then we have the Bulwark class. These are your close-range sword and board units. If you like these guys and want to play them on the tabletop, please do. Blade Guard have always and will continue to be badass no matter what happens. You get to walk around with a storm shield that blocks all incoming projectiles, and not to mention Bulwark is a great frontline character that helps others get into combat. You also have some good melee options, the Power Sword and Power Fist, And as far as secondaries are concerned, these are only ranged options, unfortunately. The Bulwark also receives a plasma pistol early on, which is a great close to mid-range pistol for a class that has 0 other range capability. The Bulwark's ability is dropping a banner that brings back armor to your team as the Emperor's light shines upon you. One of the most fun classes, in my opinion. Now, we have Sniper. I'm pretty much a terrible sniper in any shooter, so I'm certainly going to have a different opinion than some others on this class. You can turn invisible and sneak behind enemies to get the drop on them. It's pretty sweet. That being said, I've had more luck mag dumping people with the SMG in this class than I've had with the Sniper. Overall, cool class if you like range and stealth combat, but not for me. Good for you if you like it though. Lastly, we have the Heavy. Our Gravis Marine has the Iron Halo, which protects himself and the rest of his team for a limited time with an awesome bubble that prevents ranged attacks. He can use the Heavy Bolter as well as some of the other heavy weaponry found in the game. I'm not a high enough level yet as of recording, but I have to assume that the multi-melta will be disgusting on this class once people play a bit more. So, the core gameplay loop is very fun. It's a hybrid of a third-person cover shooter and a hack and slash. So melee attacks ignore shields, so it gives them an edge over range attacks that need to punch through the shield first. It really creates an interesting triangle, I guess, of interactions. The guns feel punchy, and murdering people with chainswords is always going to be fun. I find this mode to be not fully there yet compared to Operations and the campaign. Only having 3 maps is tough. Also, the sound design seems pretty inconsistent in my experience. I usually play with my M50Xs on, and will occasionally have a hard time figuring out where the enemy is coming from. But not in like a challenging kind of way, but in like a way where it's like I hear them coming from the right, but they're coming from the left. It's not a good time. Like I already mentioned earlier, the jump packs need to have some kind of effect before you're about to get dived. It just feels bad when you get stomped for something you couldn't even tell was coming. Especially when the Thunderhammer seems to practically be a one-hit kill most times. Almost every teamfight I'm a part of in PvP starts by people chucking grenades, and it feels just kind of formulaic once you're on your 5th game of the day, and it just kind of makes some of the interactions boring. Overall, I think some fine-tuning and some new PvP modes and maps would really help with the longevity of this game. I love Operations, but I'm a PvP guy at heart. Saber has the opportunity to make an already pretty good PvP mode into an incredible multiplayer that keeps 40k and shooter fans satiated for a long time. Space Marine 2 isn't a perfect game, no. But it feels really great to see a genuinely awesome 40k game that has so much love and heart put behind it. I might have sounded a little negative in this video, but I genuinely enjoyed this game, and I just want it to be the best that it can be. A lot of 40k stories aren't perfect. Most are pretty good, some are terrible. It's bound to happen when you have hundreds of stories told across different mediums, all made by different creative teams. So please, don't take away that I'm disappointed in this game. I'm not. I love a lot of what's in this game, and honestly, I think my whole 7 out of 10 rating will likely change in a year from now once some of the DLC comes out, assuming it's created with the same passion that the base game was. Alright, what did you think? Have you been playing Space Marine 2? What's your Space Marine look like? Do you have your own custom chapter you're rolling with, or are you playing as one of the preset recognizable foundings? Let me know in the comments. Folks, thank you so much for watching as always. You've been wonderful, I've been Jared, and I'll see you guys next time. Also, I promise more comic book content is coming soon. I've just been busy, and I've been on a kick of different stuff like fighting games and other video games and whatnot lately. But yeah, probably Batman thing coming soon. Batman, woo!